There was a village situated on the outskirts of Hounsville. Hailing Cove, they had called it. A village filled with folk that worked so hard you would think they were machines. Folk that had nothing but worked for everything. It never mattered how much they earned or what job they would take on. Laughter, happiness, and dedication was an aroma that surrounded the entire village. However, a place that was once filled with the pleasant noises of getting through the ins and outs of life had now been replaced with an eerie silence. Despite the strong winds whistling through the village, despite the warm candlelit room shining through the windows, despite the heavy raindrops soaking the muddy ground, the quiet village could not hide the plague-like mist that lingered throughout. A monstrous beast with black fur walked slowly in Hailing Cove. There was something behind it being dragged by its arm, but the darkness refused to reveal any more. Then the bolt of lightning that struck behind the village shed more light. This was only for a mere second perhaps, but it was enough. There stood a tall creature with red eyes that appeared to be a werewolf, but moved like anything but. It had been dragging one of the villagers behind him as if the lifeless victim weighed less than a feather. The body was a pale ghostly white with its skin like melted wax folded over its bones. The eye sockets were sunken in while the eyeballs dangled in front. The lips were blue, the veins dark black like tributaries on a map, and the body was cold to the touch. The two pointy fangs kept the monster's mouth from closing properly. Its long tongue licked its snout as it threw the body into the village river, like throwing a pillow. Then the second lightning flash revealed the horror that lied in front. There was a pile of bodies of every villager that occupied a home in Hailing Cove. The werewolf-like monster used its shoulder to shove the pile of bodies into the river, watching the strong current carry the villagers downstream. But from what seemed to be a werewolf had now become more complicated. The fur fell off its body like a snake shedding its skin like charcoal tightly wrapped around its long, slender, bony structure. Its eyes were glowing red in the night as it crouched to the ground like the monster was in pain. But then, the two large rings, dark like its skin, had pushed out from its spine and the monster had flown away into the night, never to be seen again. However, there was a villager that survived in Hailing Cove. There was a little boy that wore a bandit mask, waiting for his father to come home to play cowboys and outlaws with him. While he was hiding underneath a wooden pallet, his body was stricken with sheer grief and trembling with horror, watching his parents being dragged by this ominous beast. Once the monster flew away, the 9-year-old boy crawled out of the dirty mud with the rain masking the tears rolling down his face like mini floods. He walked aimlessly all the way to an old telephone booth near the Redwater train station. He fumbled in his old rags for clothes and found a penny given to him by his late father. He then inserted it into the coin slot of the phone, dialed the number, and in his quaky, wavering voice he says,
"Hello? Redwater Police Station? May I speak to Fillian Hunt, please? I am from the village of Hailing Cove and my parents have just been murdered."
Fillian Hunt was at the Redwater Medical and Rehabilitation Center. Fillian's body ran on fumes, but the reason for the visit was for someone else, Captain Laura Mills. It was unusual seeing Captain Mills with untidy long hair and eyes that appeared to be anything but focused. However, she was justified since the captain had a near-death experience. With bandages around her neck, head, wrists, and back, her eyelids struggled to open as she saw Fillian sitting by her bedside, giving her that warm, charming, and comfortable smile that he wore so well. He said, "You need to rest, Captain. You were in a terrible accident." But while he said it, his eyes never met hers. For the first time in a long time, Fillian Hunt told a lie. This was the doctor's orders. Laura Mills was almost killed by Josephine, an old evil witch powerful beyond belief. The light brown-skinned woman hit her head so many times 2 nights ago that she had now been suffering from short-term memory loss. The vampire cop, while being able to rescue his captain and outsmart the crone, did not come out unscathed. The deep scar running down from his sternum to his abdomen and a constant limp in his left leg were wounds that, despite being a vampire, were not healing. Captain Mills said,
Fillian, I keep having flashbacks of a dark basement and ropes tied to my hands.
Panic found his face as he looked behind him frantically. Thankfully, the nurses and the doctor stepped in, which in turn gave the vampire cop his cue to leave. How could he tell Captain Mills everything that happened? How could he tell her the crone was in fact the one that killed Captain Langley? How would he tell her that she wanted his heart for a foul ritual and managed to fool her by doing something so unlike his character? Nevertheless, the vampire smiled warmly and walked out, hiding the dilemma in his mind. It seemed like whoever knew Fillian was a vampire had been hunted or used against him. 7 p.m. and the vampire cop knew lying will get him nowhere. But by the end of the night, when Captain Mills gets discharged, he would tell her everything that happened. For now, he received a troublesome message on his pager. Come to the Redwater police station immediately. Fillian was worried. What if Anne-Marie conjured up one of her devious plans to make the vampire cop's life miserable? Maybe they found out he was a vampire. However, when he reached the station, he found the matter at hand to be much worse. There was a young boy that called in, stricken with so much of fear that he could barely speak. He said his parents were murdered from the village of Hailing Cove, Hounsville, and asked for Fillian specifically. This was no secret, he was well known in Hounsville. Most folk knew he was a vampire from Lullaby Town since the werewolf case. Fillian also knew they were good folk trying to make an honest living. Though, what troubled the vampire cop was the fact that the boy wasn't inside the station. It was dark, cold and rainy, and a child maybe 8 to 9 years of age by the voice was wandering around by his lonesome, scared as can be. Fillian set out at once while the other inspectors patrolled near the train station where the call was made. The vampire frantically looked around in the rain, making his way to the village of Hailing Cove, but also stopping bystanders to ask if they had seen the boy or heard anything from the village. With a troubled mind and a heavy heart, Fillian thought, maybe the boy got lost trying to find the Redwater police station. After all, folk in Hounsville did not have the means to travel. Fillian thought, what would he do if he got lost? Then he remembered that he would trace his steps back. Thus, Fillian Hunt made his way to the village of Hailing Cove in the pouring rain while the sky rumbled with thunder. He saw the lightning flashes as the thick clouds illuminated in the night sky, lighting up his eyes. He took a deep breath in to calm his nerves and said, "Kid, wherever you are, just hold on tight." The vampire cop had entered the village of Hailing Cove in search for the young boy. He felt the air unclean and the presence of an ominous monster that left shortly before. However, this investigation was different from the others. There was nothing for him to go on. The surrounding towns and village folk mentioned hearing no screams or anything untoward from Hailing Cove. Although they did say the village was way too quiet. Now Fillian had understood why, since the village was empty. The only witness to the murders was a kid that he could not find. Fillian was always in control of any situation dealing with the foulest of creatures, but for the first time the vampire cop felt an emptiness surrounding his chest. He began searching for the child while carrying out his investigation. The heavy rain drenched his long black coat as he walked slowly in the village. His black steel-toed boots were messed by the splashes of mud puddles. His eyes then glowed red as if he was a robot, scanning the area to find what the normal eye could not see. Then on the ground he found werewolf footprints, but how strange was this, that despite the prints being large, they were certainly not heavy. Was this a werewolf so slender that it weighed less than the average human? Or perhaps a werewolf that moved like a vampire? Then he crouched on the ground, unbothered by the dirt splashing on his clothes, and saw tracks of people being dragged and streaks of blood painted on the ground of Hailing Cove. While he remained in the crouching position, the vampire did a duck walk that became a crawl. He followed the tracks and noticed something even more troubling. Why didn't the people run away? Why were there tracks leading from their homes and yet nothing towards the exit of the village? The village folk walked but never ran. None of them tried escaping. When he stood up, he felt a surge of pain in his left leg and a sharp stabbing sensation in his chest. Nor could he breathe properly with the thick fog surrounding the village. What exactly did the crone do to him that did not allow his wounds to heal? There were too many houses in the village, and even with Fillian's speed, he barely explored half of it. However, he noticed the black fur was also on the wooden floors in many of the homes. He thought to himself, no signs of forceful entry, then how did the werewolf-like creature enter their homes? Maybe the village folk opened their doors for it. But why would they ever do such a thing? Nevertheless, he followed the tracks leading to the river, a long windy river supplying the people of Hailing Cove with water. The tracks, however, ended at the riverbank. He watched the currents flowing fast and hard, bending at each curve of the land. He thought, while werewolves were monsters with unique powers and strengths, swimming was not one of them. But where did the river lead to, and how did the werewolf-like creature leave the village? He looked around to see if anyone was nearby before climbing up the rooftops, so quickly that if one blinked, they would miss it. The old roof tiles were damaged and had scratch marks from thin, sharp nails rather than claws. Fillian soared from rooftop to rooftop, seeing a trail of blood that disappeared into the night. This told him the monster was either wounded by the villagers or had already been hurt. It also told him the creature could jump and move like a werewolf, but the feathers resembled the wings shared with vampires from Cascada. The vampire cop touched the spot of blood with his fingers, then tasted it. Without hesitation, Fillian spat it out. The taste of blood of a living person compared to that of a deceased might not seem like much of a difference, but to a vampire, the difference was night and day. Blood gas is determined by various factors, such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, and pH. But since the above will be non-existent for a deceased person, the taste of blood for a vampire can easily be distinguished. However, that would mean the creature was—
"Excuse me, sir, but what do you think you were doing on the rooftop of that house? Please do not tell me you were trying to break in."
There was a voice that echoed beneath Fillian as he carelessly climbed back down, just to show that that was the way he climbed up. The mystery continued yet again. Fillian's hearing was unmatched, heightened to such an extent that he could hear a person's heartbeat. So where did this young man wearing a white lab coat come from? The vampire cop flipped his badge open, then told him this was an investigation. The young man introduced himself as Miguel, the village doctor that does his nightly checkups. Then at that moment, down the village, a squeaky wooden door opened up and the 9-year-old boy walked out. He looked dehydrated and starved, wobbling as he walked. It also seemed like he had a long way back to Hailing Cove just to seek shelter from not knowing where the Redwater police station was. He saw the vampire cop and his eyes widened. The child tried to talk, but no voice had left his throat. He was so traumatized that his old pants got wet from emptying his bladder. The trembling started again as the boy had a seizure. Fillian ran and held the child while the doctor removed an injection from his suitcase. "Wait, what are you doing?" the vampire cop asked. The doctor replied that it was a sedative. The boy was having a PTSD episode. This will help calm his nerves and get him the rest that he deserves. Fillian said PTSD.
Yes, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a mental health condition caused by witnessing an extremely terrifying or disturbing event. Memories of trauma, nightmares, flashback, etc. Please, I need to administer this right away.
Fillian said, sure, go ahead, but if this kid doesn't wake up, these handcuffs will be wrapped around your wrist. Dr. Mikhail gave a warm professional smile and injected the boy as his eyes closed like a dim light, finally coming to rest. Fillian Hunt then called one of his colleagues from the station to have the child taken and treated at the Redwater Medical Center, where Captain Mills was admitted. Fillian asked Dr. Mikhail, since you visit here frequently, where does the river lead to? Mikhail replied,
Oh, it's a long river, Inspector, and never have I pursued it. Especially with the current being this rapid, we cannot travel by boat. Though I do have a vehicle that we could use. Please, Inspector, I would like to do anything that can help with your investigation and find out what happened to my patients.
Fillian Hunt accompanied the doctor to his vehicle while constantly turning back. What was really going on in the village of Hailing Cove? What was this eerie, mysterious fog that hovered in the air? Was there even one monster to begin with, and if there was, judging by the footprints, a creature so large could be heard or seen a mile away, then why didn't they run? Why did they not see the onslaught coming? Why were they quiet? But more importantly, if they were dumped into the river as the tracks displayed, then where does the river lead to? The vampire and Dr. Mikhail reached their destination. The bottom of the river led to a morgue that never showed up on any map in Huntsville. Fillian has seen many things in his long life, but this made him throw up. The foul stench and the horrific sight of corpses heaped up like garbage. He recognized the clothes and knew immediately these were the people from Hailing Cove. The victims looked like melted wax completely drained of their blood, with their brains removed. Dr. Mikhail stood in horror as words could not find his tongue. The lights were on in the morgue, but there was no movement from the inside. Fillian walked towards the front door, chained and locked. Just as he was going to kick the door open, Dr. Mikhail stopped him. "Hold on, Inspector," he said.
The good thing about being a call-out doctor is we have the keys to every medical center. Just give me a minute.
He fumbled with a large ring of keys for a very long time before opening the morgue door. The vampire cop walked in and saw experimental equipment for blood transfusions. There were countless of test tubes, operating tables, and a glass cabinet filled with human brains. Then there was an article on the wall of a medical doctor being fired more than 65 years ago for malpractice in hallucinogens, although the article did not have any names or locations listed. Dr. Mikhail walked around the morgue with his eyes wide open from the horror that he witnessed. Who would do such a thing? He had asked. Then at that moment, the vampire cop's old phone rang. He recognized the number coming from Captain Mills. "Captain, you are supposed to be resting. I am currently
Fillian, listen to me. The kid is sitting next to me right now. He tried to tell you earlier. Fillian, the doctor is the hybrid. It's the must. He drugged the people of Hailing Cove. That's why they couldn't see him. Get out of there now."
What was this eerie, mysterious fog that hovered in the air? Bandit marks, no signs of forceful entry. Then how did the werewolf-like creature enter their homes? Maybe the village folk opened their doors for it. But why would they ever do such a thing? The village doctor that does his nightly checkups. But since the above will be non-existent for a deceased person, a medical doctor being fired more than 65 years ago for malpractice in hallucinogens, the bottom of the river led to a morgue that never showed up on any map in Huntsville.
The good thing about being a call-out doctor is we have the keys to every medical center.
The child tried to talk, but no voice had left his throat. The vampire cop slowly turned around and looked at the mirror towards his right. While hallucinogens may alter perception of the eyes, the mirror showed Dr. Mikhail's true reflection. Fillian saw an eerie, tall, slender werewolf-vampire hybrid with sharp fangs and glowing red eyes. The doctor then said,
"We can do this the hard way or the easy way, Inspector. Join us. This is what Anne-Marie wanted. I was a vampire just like you once upon a time, but I was weak. Heightened speed, heightened senses, but where was the power? Where was the strength? I became ridiculed, fired from my job all those years ago, and the only one that saved me was Anne-Marie. She wants to make you our leader. She wants you to be the strongest hybrid the world will ever see. We have so much of blood now. So many bodies to experiment on. We have hideouts at every location in the land. Join us, Inspector. We are the winning team."
Rage filled the vampire's eyes as it turned red. His fangs pushed out while he could feel his blood boiling. He clenched his fist so tight that his hands turned paler than its usual color. Fillian charged at the hybrid, pushing him so hard they broke through the side wall of the morgue. He threw so many punches with such speed, his hands looked like blurs moving against the wind. But yet, not one punch landed. The hybrid grabbed Fillian by the throat and tossed him aside like he was nothing.
"You are wounded, Inspector. You're slow. You're weak and pathetic. Lord Dracula did say you will put up a fight."
The vampire got up to his feet and limped on his left leg. He felt 100 razors cutting his chest from the wounds inflicted 2 nights ago. The hybrid was correct. Fillian Hunt at this moment was indeed weak. The hybrid and the vampire fought, with Fillian taking the worst beating that he has ever received. He kept getting up. He knew this time that he was outmatched. Hybrids moved faster than bullets, but this hybrid was on a different level altogether. Such strength, such power and speed. Ragnar the White Wolf himself would struggle. However, the werewolf-vampire hybrid was unaware of what Fillian was trying to do. He was baffled as to why the vampire cop kept getting up to his feet every time that he was knocked down. The fight moved closer and closer towards the river. The storm louder than it ever was, and the night seemed much darker than before. Fillian stood at the edge of the riverbank. His leg trembled with pain and he coughed out so much of blood from all the hits that he had taken. The hybrid walked confidently, with his red eyes staring into Fillian's soul.
"Well,"
he said,
"I tried. If you will not join us, I do have to kill you. Such a pity, Inspector. We would have made a really good team."
"You're an idiot."
"What did you say?"
"I said you're an idiot. You may be able to move and fight like me. Your strength may tower mine, but there's one thing you're forgetting. You cannot swim." The hybrid's eyes widened with the sudden realization of what the vampire cop was trying to do. Fillian latched onto the hybrid in a bear hug, swirled his body around and submerged both him and the monster deep into the river. Now the playing field was leveled. All that speed and all that power was useless underwater. Fillian, with blood in his mouth, smiled at the hybrid, watching his lungs collapse. When the hybrid stopped struggling, Fillian dragged the monster's body out of the river. In pain and exhaustion, something the vampire cop was not used to, he dragged the hybrid monster using the long way back to Redwater, through the woods. Fillian walked into the ward Captain Mills was in. His hair was messy, his clothes muddy, and he could barely stand. He saw Laura feeding her dinner to the 9-year-old boy that stared into oblivion. Is he going to be okay?
I guess. I called my sister. She said she'll take care of him until we find him a good home. You look like crap, Fillian.
Well, I look better than I feel.
Did you manage to catch him?
Yeah.
Go home and rest, Inspector. I was going to ask you what happened 2 nights ago. My memory comes and goes and there are pieces missing. but maybe tomorrow, okay?
That night, Captain,
That's an order, Inspector. You are on leave, effective immediately. Fillian, you are not okay, and I don't know what's going on. But for now, you need to recover.
The vampire cop walked home just before sunrise. The pain in his left leg was now at an all-time high. He opened the door of his wooden cabin, locked it behind him, and then made his way downstairs to the basement. The Werewolf-Vampire Hybrid, Dr. Miguel, sat on a wooden chair restrained with chains. Fillian took a deep breath in as he threw his long black coat onto a wooden table near his library. He limped his way to the arsenal of weapons hanging on the wall. At first, the silver axes and knives did look tempting, but he opted for something else. The vampire cop removed an old hammer with hooks on the sides from the rack above, then grabbed a jar of rusty nails, some straight and others bent. He told the hybrid, "You're going to tell me everything you know, or you're going to wish that I drowned you in that river."